Sign this resignation letter, or we terminate you right now. No good morning. No let's grab a coffee. Just that sentence sitting on the mahogany table like a body bag. 21 years. I started at Ironclad Solutions when the servers were the size of refrigerators, and I was just a hungry 25-year-old kid in a thrift store suit. I stayed through the 2008 crash, the 2020 lockdowns, and 3 different CEOs who couldn't find their own offices without a map. As head of global operations, I was the one who kept the lights on in 4 different time zones, while the C-suite was out playing golf and sipping $400 scotch. But now, I was 46, and apparently that's expired to the new owners, Blackridge Holdings. These guys are the ultimate corporate vultures. They don't build businesses. They strip them for parts like a stolen Honda in a chop shop. They fire the expensive people with experience and replace them with 22-year-old grustlers who don't know a database from a spreadsheet, but will work for peanuts and clout. The CEO, Marcus, a guy who wears $2,000 sneakers to work and calls everyone champ, was looking at his watch. "We're pivoting, Renee," he said, sounding like a ChatGPT prompt. "We need fresh energy. Legacy thinking is holding us back." Legacy thinking. That's corporate speak for you're too old to be brainwashed and you know where the bodies are buried. They gave me 30 minutes. 30 minutes to decide if my career died quietly with a pathetic 3-week severance, or if I got buried screaming with a terminated for cause stain on my record. They thought I'd fold because I had a mortgage and a kid in college. What they didn't realize was that I'd been watching them since the day the merger was announced. I saw the secret meetings. I saw the way they started CCing my junior assistants on emails that should have been mine. I knew the meat grinder was coming, and I didn't just sharpen my tools. I built an arsenal. I looked at the pen. My heart was thumping like a trapped bird, but my hands were steady. "I need a minute," I said, my voice flat. "You have 29, Marcus smirked. I wasn't shaking. I was calculating. In tech, we have a saying, garbage in, garbage out. Blackridge had just handed me a pile of garbage, and they expected me to swallow it. But they forgot one thing. I designed the systems that run their entire paycheck. I didn't just know the business. I was the business. By August, they thought they'd cornered me. They didn't realize I'd already memorized every exit. And I'd spent the last 3 months locking them from the inside. They were about to find out what happens when you try to ghost the person who holds the keys to the kingdom. The meeting invite hit at 3:07 p.m. No subject, just Conference Room C, immediate. In the corporate world, Conference Room C is where dreams go to get a toe tag. When I walked in, the judgment squad was already seated. CEO, CFO, HR, and a legal note-taker who looked like he'd never seen sunlight. They didn't ask how I was. They pointed to the chair. "Renee, after a strategic review, we've decided to move in a different direction," Marcus said. "Means you're done breathing our air." The CFO slid a folder toward me. It contained 2 paths to the exit. Option 1, resign immediately for 3 weeks' pay and a neutral reference. After 21 years, they were offering me less than a month of groceries. Option 2, termination for restructuring, no severance, a permanent scar on my record. Inside the folder was a resignation letter they'd already written, loaded with legal poison and a waiver stripping me of my right to sue for age discrimination. I didn't even touch the pen. "I'll resign," I said. I saw Marcus relax. He thought he'd won. He thought he'd saved the company $1 million in contract payouts with a little bit of bullying. "But," I added, leaning back, "I'm writing my own letter." The air went dead. Sarah from HR tried to intervene. "We can't accept a custom letter, Renee. It's against policy." "Actually," I said, "you can. Because if you force me to sign a pre-written waiver under duress with 30 minutes notice, any judge in Denver is going to toss it into the shredder. You want me gone today? I write the letter. I sign it. We're done. Fine, Marcus snapped. End of day. I walked out at 3:31 p.m. What they didn't know? That letter already existed. I'd written it weeks ago and had it vetted by a lawyer who eats private equity firms for breakfast. It was one sentence long. Cold, precise, fatal. I spent my final hour at Ironclad doing something they never expected. I didn't pack my pictures or my mug. I went into the server logs. I made sure my digital receipts were synced to my personal cloud. I documented every Slack message where Marcus called the senior staff, the geriatric ward. At 4:16 p.m., I returned and slid my letter across the table. Marcus skimmed it. He was so giddy about hitting his reduction in force numbers for the quarterly report that he didn't even process the phrasing. Looks fine, he said, scribbling his initials. Security will escort you out. No need, I said. I've been packed since lunch. That one sentence he just signed? It was about to cost them millions. 5 days later, their top-tier, $1,000 an hour lawyer called me before sunrise. And for the first time in my career, I didn't hear a boss on the other end of the line. I heard a man who realized his client had just signed a blank check to their worst nightmare. The phone rang at 7:41 a.m. Ms. Walker, this is Elias Thorne, lead counsel for Blackridge Holdings. We need to discuss your resignation. Reviewing is good, Elias, I said, watching the sunrise. Understanding is better. Did Marcus explain the part where he signed it? There was a long, painful silence. The language you used. Effective upon receipt of complete settlement. It's non-standard. We've deactivated your badges. You're no longer an employee. Elias, let's skip the posturing, I said. I read my 2018 contract, the one Blackridge assumed when they bought us. Page 42, section 8.4, change of control protection. Since I was pushed out after a merger, it triggers an immediate payout of 24 months' salary, my full bonus, and instant vesting of all stock. And because Marcus signed my letter acknowledging a complete settlement is pending, I'm still technically on the payroll. I heard the sound of pages flipping frantically. Since the settlement hasn't been paid, I continued, the condition of my resignation hasn't been met. I'm still an employee. I'm still earning my $280,000 salary. I'm still on the premium health plan. And every day you don't pay me that 7-figure bag, the interest is ticking up at the state-mandated rate for unpaid wages. You're dreaming if you think we'll pay that, he hissed. Elias, tell Marcus that if we go to court, I'm bringing the receipts. I have the Slack logs where he called me Grandma. I have the data showing every person fired this month was over 40. Discovery is a nasty word, isn't it? It means I get to dig through your trash. We can offer you 6 months of severance, Elias said, his voice dropping. Right now, to end this. I laughed. The price of my silence just went up. I'm not just looking for my contract payout anymore. I'm looking for the asshole tax. You tried to perp walk me out of a building I helped build. Now you're going to pay for the privilege of never seeing me in a courtroom. I hung up. By noon, my work email, which they had cut off, was suddenly back online. They were panicking. They realized that by firing me, they'd actually accidentally promoted me to the most expensive consultant they'd ever had. That phone call lit the fuse, but the real explosion happened when their global logistics cluster suffered a sync lag. The system I designed was breaking, and the fresh energy they hired to replace me didn't even know where the on button was. By the next morning, the internal legal threads at Ironclad were glowing white hot. Since I still had employee status, my automated alerts were still hitting my phone. Blackridge Holdings thought they were geniuses for trimming the fat, but they forgot that the fat was the muscle. Their shipping routes for a $500 million client in Singapore just turned into a digital knot. The junior Grussler they put in my chair, a kid named Tyler who spent more time on TikTok than in the terminal, had no idea how to fix it. He didn't know the legacy code. He didn't know the system required a manual handshake every 72 hours because of an old API glitch from 2012. My phone started blowing up. Not from legal, but from the ops team. Renee, the Singapore line is down. Tyler deleted the cron job. Everything is backing up. Marcus is screaming. I didn't reply. I wasn't an employee who fixed things anymore. I was an unpaid settlement holder. At 2 p.m., Marcus himself called me. No sneakers, no champ. He sounded like he was hyperventilating. Renee, look. We might have moved too fast. The Singapore account is flagging a breach of contract. I need you to log in and stabilize the cluster. We can talk about the money later. Talk about the money later? I scoffed. Marcus, you killed the loyal soldier in conference room C. Now you're talking to a creditor, and this creditor doesn't work on credit. I'll have a check for $250,000 cut today, he yelled. That's a down payment, I said. The total is $1.4 million, plus attorney fees, plus a written apology for the legacy thinking comment. Until that wire hits, I'm just a civilian enjoying my coffee. You're sabotaging us. Nope, I'm just not helping you. There's a big difference. You wanted fresh energy. Well, go get some of that energy to fix your API. Hope Tyler is as sharp as you thought. I hung up. I knew exactly what was happening. They were bleeding money by the second. The Singapore client had a time is of the essence clause. If the system stayed down for 6 hours, Ironclad owed them $50,000 an hour. I had them by the throat. They had treated me like an expiring asset. Now I was treating them like a failing investment. By midnight, the Blackridge board of directors stepped in. They realized Marcus was a liability who had turned a simple firing into a multi-million-dollar catastrophe. They were ready to pay, but they were also looking for a way to make me pay for the humiliation. The final negotiation happened over Zoom with 3 board members and their fixer lawyer. Marcus wasn't invited. Ms. Walker, the lead board member said, we've reviewed your documentation. We've also seen the situation with Singapore. It's clear there has been a misunderstanding regarding your value. Misunderstanding. The word you use when you get caught trying to rob someone. I have the wire transfer instructions ready, I said. The figure is $1.6 million. That covers my contract, my equity, my emotional asshole tax, and the time I spent listening to Elias Thorne lie to me. The fixer lawyer leaned in. In exchange, you sign an NDA so tight, you won't even be able to tell your cat about this. You hand over all receipts, all recordings, and all copies of internal emails. You become a ghost. Gladly, I said. I want to forget Ironclad exists. But the wire hits first. Once the funds clear, I'll send the delete all confirmation. They didn't haggle. They couldn't. The Singapore contract was worth $40 million a year. Losing it because they were too cheap to pay my severance was a math problem even a private equity shark could solve. I sat at my table, refreshing my banking app. 2:12 p.m. Pending $1,600,000. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. 21 years of stress and corporate gaslighting vanished in a single click. I kept my word. I sent the decryption key for the API fix to the ops team. I sent the signed NDA. Then I wiped my work laptop. I didn't need the ammo anymore. I had the bag. But as I was cleaning my desk, I found a note from a junior dev I'd mentored. "Thanks for always having our backs, Renee. They'd be lost without you." It hit me then. This wasn't just about the money. It was about the fact that guys like Marcus think people are just lines on a ledger. They think you can delete experience and replace it with a cheaper version. They don't realize that when you cut the heart out of a company, the body starts to rot. I thought that was the end. I thought I'd take my million and ride off into the sunset. But 2 weeks later, I got a text from a former coworker that made my blood run cold. The rot hadn't stayed at Ironclad. It was spreading, and they were trying to blame me for the company's collapse. The text came from Jen, one of the few managers left. "Renee, don't answer any calls from the firm. Marcus is telling the board that the Singapore glitch was sabotage. He's saying you planted a logic bomb before you left. They're talking about suing to claw back the settlement." I felt a surge of cold fury. I hadn't sabotaged anything. The system broke because they were too incompetent to maintain it. But Marcus was a cornered rat. He had lost the Singapore account. The client had seen enough of the new Ironclad to bail, and he needed someone to blame for the $40 million hole in the budget. He chose me, again. But Marcus made one fatal mistake. He forgot that I didn't just design the logistics systems. I designed the security logs. I didn't need to break into their system to prove my innocence. I just needed to show what I'd already saved. See, part of my receipts wasn't just emails, it was user access logs. I called Elias, the lawyer. "Elias, tell Marcus to stop. If he mentions sabotage to one more person, I'm going to release a very specific document I forgot to delete. Renee, you signed a contract. I signed an NDA about your business. I didn't sign away my right to defend myself against criminal accusations. I have the logs, Elias. I have the logs showing that Tyler, the fresh energy kid, logged into the Singapore server at 11:45 p.m. the night I left and tried to change the root password. He locked the system out. He caused the glitch. Not me." Silence. "And," I added, "I have the recording of the call where Marcus begged me to fix it. Why would he beg a saboteur to fix the system? It looks like a desperate man trying to cover his own tracks." I'll talk to my client," Elias stammered. "Do that. And tell him that if he even whispers my name in a negative light again, the next thing he receives will be a defamation suit that'll make my settlement look like pocket change." I realized then that the corporate world doesn't respect loyalty. It only respects the power to hit back harder than you were hit. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was a warning shot. I was officially out of the game, but the game wasn't done with me. It turned out I wasn't the only one Blackridge had tried to meat grind, and a group of former executives was starting to reach out. They wanted my playbook. Within a month, I was no longer unemployed Renee. I was consultant Renee. But I wasn't consulting on logistics. I was consulting on survival. I started getting pings on LinkedIn from people in their 40s and 50s at other firms Blackridge had bought. "They're doing it to us too," they'd say. "How did you get the bag? How did you make them pay?" I realized I had a choice. I could sit on my million and be quiet, or I could use what I'd learned to level the playing field. I started the Revenge Diaries, a private consulting service for veteran professionals being pushed out by private equity vultures. The first rule I taught them? The system is the evidence. The second rule? Never leave quietly. I taught them how to document the subtle ageism, how to track the quiet hiring of their replacements, how to build a war chest of receipts so that when the day comes to sit in conference room, they aren't the ones shaking, they're the ones smiling. I watched as 3 other executives used my conditional resignation tactic. They all walked away with 6-figure payouts. We were starting to cost Blackridge Holdings real money. We were a glitch in their business model that they couldn't patch. As for ironclad solutions, it didn't last the year. Without the legacy people who knew how the systems worked, the company started a glitch every week. Clients fled. The board eventually fired Marcus, ironically, with no severance and a very public termination for cause for his failure to manage the transition. I saw him at a tech conference a few months later. He was wearing a cheaper suit. He tried to avoid me, but I walked right up to him. "Hey, Marcus," I said, smiling. "Renee," he muttered, looking at his shoes. "Just wanted to say thanks. If you hadn't tried to bury me, I'd still be working 80 hours a week for you. Instead, I'm working 10 hours a week for myself. And I've never been richer." I walked away without waiting for a reply. The lesson isn't rage. Rage is messy. The lesson is control. Know your contract. Save everything. And never let a suit tell you what you're worth. Sometimes the darkest revenge is letting them destroy themselves with the paperwork they were too arrogant to read. If you think this was brutal, wait until you hear what happened to the next executive who tried this on a friend of mine. If this story made your blood boil, you already know why Revenge Diaries exists. Hit that like button. It tells the algorithm this truth needs to be heard. Subscribe to Revenge Diaries if you're done watching powerful people get away with dirty moves. And drop a comment below. Where are you watching from? Or tell me, what would you have done in my place? This isn't fiction. This is Revenge Diaries. And the next story? It's even colder. Thanks for watching.
Let's talk about the exact moment I realized my marriage was being treated like an open audition. I'm standing in the lobby of my husband's office. It's a normal Tuesday, or it should have been. But then I see her. This girl, we'll call her Susan, is walking down the hall like she's trying to manifest a modeling contract in a restaurant supply warehouse. And she's wearing them. You know the ones. The viral scrunch butt TikTok leggings that are basically high-definition 4K for every curve on your body. Now, I'm not a hater. Wear what you want at the gym, but at a professional workplace, where my husband is a manager, that's not a fit. That's a statement. She stops, looks over her shoulder, catches my eye, and gives me this smirk. It wasn't a hello smile. It was a watch what I can do smile. She thought I was going to be the insecure wife who screams at the parking lot and makes herself look crazy. Oh, honey, no, I don't do crazy. I do consequences. If you've ever had to deal with a pick-me girl who thinks your husband is public property, or if you just love a story where the villain gets exactly what they asked for, hit that like button. Subscribe for the Clean Revenge series. Because today, I'm teaching a masterclass on how to dismantle a home wrecker without ever raising your voice. Let's back up. I'm 29. My husband, Ethan, and I have been goals since we were 20. He's a total green flag. I'm talking about the kind of man who still holds the car door open and has a framed photo of our wedding on his desk, right next to his World's Best Dad mug. Ethan worked at this medium-sized restaurant supply company. It's a blue-collar vibe. Everyone's in flannels or polos. It's a family atmosphere. I used to swing by 3 times a week for lunch. I knew the receptionist. I knew the warehouse guys. I knew the owner. And Ethan, he's a locked-in kind of man. Wedding band stays on. If a woman flirted with him at a bar, he'd probably think she was just being really polite. He's a bit oblivious. Bless his heart. But that's why I love him. He's loyal to a fault. So when the company hired a couple of new delivery drivers to handle the holiday rush, I didn't think twice about it until Susan entered the chat. He whispers,
Hey, just a heads up. The new girl is moving a little sus around Ethan.
I laughed it off. I was like, Ethan, the man who spent 40 minutes choosing a brand of paper towels yesterday, he's not noticing a flirt. But then I saw it. Susan walks into the break room. She sees me sitting there with Ethan. I give her a polite, wife of the boss smile. I say, Hi, I'm Ethan's wife. Nice to meet you. Y'all, the way her face dropped, it was like I just told her Christmas was canceled. Her eyes immediately flicked to his left hand. She checked for the ring. And then she looked at me, not with friendliness, but like she was sizing up the competition. From that day on, she was unhinged. She'd accidentally forget how to log her delivery hours and need Ethan to show her again at his desk. She'd hover. She'd giggle. She was doing the damsel in distress routine, and Ethan was just trying to get his spreadsheets done. The red flags weren't just waving. They were setting themselves on fire. Ethan eventually realized something was off because she was getting bold. He told her, point blank, Hey, Susan, I'm happily married. Let's keep it strictly professional. Most people would be embarrassed, right? Most people would crawl into a hole and never come out. Not Susan. She looked him dead in the eye and said, Oh, so am I. But it's always good to have options, isn't it? Just in case. When Ethan told me that, I felt my soul leave my body for a second. Options? My husband isn't a limited time offer at a grocery store, sweetie. He's the whole store. But I stayed calm. I told Ethan, Don't worry about it. Let her play her little games. She's going to trip over her own feet eventually. And boy, did she. The final boss moment happened on a Friday. I went to pick Ethan up for a weekend getaway. I was feeling good, looking cute. I walk in, and Susan is there, getting ready for her last delivery. She wasn't in her uniform. She was in those leggings. And let me be clear, these weren't I'm going to yoga leggings. These were I want everyone in a 3-mile radius to look at my backside leggings. As we walked toward the exit, she made sure to get in front of us. She started this. I can only describe it as a slow-motion hip sway. It was so exaggerated, it was almost comedy. She looked back, saw me watching, and gave me that I win smirk again. In that moment, I didn't feel jealous. I felt insulted. She thought she could disrespect me, my marriage, and the workplace professionalism my husband worked hard to build, all for a little ego boost. I looked at Ethan. He was looking at his phone, checking the GPS for our trip. He didn't even see her. But I did, and I decided right then. Susan needed a hobby, and that hobby was going to be looking for a new job. The next morning, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of coffee and a mission. I didn't call the manager. He was too chill. I called corporate. But I didn't go in as the angry wife. That's a rookie mistake. Corporate hates drama, but corporate loves liability. I dialed the number. I channeled my inner Southern auntie who is deeply concerned about the youth.
Yes, hello? I was just wondering if y'all have a specific dress code for your drivers? Because, see, I had a delivery yesterday, and the young lady who showed up, well, she was wearing these leggings that were so tight, I thought she'd been painted into 'em. My husband and my sons were right there in the driveway, and it was just so inappropriate for a family neighborhood.
I heard the woman on the other end gasp.
Oh dear, that's not our policy at all.
I kept going.
I don't want to get her in trouble. I'm sure she's a sweet girl, but it just looked so unprofessional for such a reputable company. I think her name was Susie or Sam.
The HR lady finished it for me.
Susan, we only have one Susan at that branch.
I hung up, went back to my normal voice, and took a sip of my coffee. Monday morning, I happened to drop by with some muffins. I walk in, and the vibe is cold. Susan is in the manager's office. She's not smirking anymore. She's crying. HR is on the speakerphone. Apparently, corporate didn't just warn her. They did a full review of her conduct. Turns out, once corporate started digging, other people felt safe to talk. They found out she'd been making inappropriate comments to other staff too. She was put on a final warning, and her hours were cut. She quit 2 weeks later, claiming the job was toxic. A year later, the tea got even hotter. My brother told me she got divorced because her husband caught her with 3 different guys at her new job. Me? I'm currently 8 months pregnant with our second. Ethan and I are thriving. The lesson? Never mistake my silence for weakness. I'm not going to scream at you in a cubicle. I'm going to make sure the options you are looking for include unemployment. If you enjoyed this clean sweep revenge, drop the comments. Tell me, have you ever had to corporate cancel a pick-me girl? I want to read your stories. Don't forget to subscribe for more. Stay classy, stay smart, and remember, the quietest person in the room is usually the one holding all the cards. Bye for now.
Imagine walking into work one morning expecting a normal day, only to find out that the most incompetent, unqualified suck-up in the entire office is suddenly your new superior. And imagine that same man humiliating you publicly, only for you to destroy his illusion of power with one perfectly timed email. That's exactly what happened to Evan Carter. The office he worked in was a cold, gray maze of cubicles and flickering lights. 30 people moved through it every day, trying to survive 8-hour shifts without losing their sanity. It wasn't a bad place, not until he came along. His name was Lance Rourke. 8 months at the company, no accomplishments, no leadership skill, just a loud laugh, a fake smile, and an unbelievable talent for kissing up to management. Everyone knew what he was, but no one expected management to actually reward him for it. So when the announcement went out that Lance had been promoted to team lead, the entire floor stopped breathing for a moment. People triple-checked the email. They thought it was a mistake, a glitch, a joke. But no, it was real. 3 qualified employees had applied. All had spotless records. All had seniority. All had the leadership experience the job required. But HR mysteriously dropped their grievances. And somehow the least qualified person in the building got the position he didn't deserve. The moment Lance received that tiny taste of authority, he transformed. He strutted through the rows of desks like a king inspecting his kingdom. He hovered behind employees, watching their screens, correcting them on work he barely understood. He used phrases like, "As your team lead," and "Management entrusted me with this team." But the truth was obvious. He wasn't a leader. He was a puppet who thought his strings were gold. And the team hated him, quietly but fiercely. Eventually, middle management confronted him. They told him people didn't like him. They told him morale was tanking. And they told him he needed to build positive relationships. Lance's idea of leadership? Force bonding. He announced monthly, not required but basically required happy hours. Always unpaid, always after hours, and always framed as the perfect opportunity to connect as a team. The office panicked. Parents scrambled for babysitters. People with long commutes tried to rearrange their lives. Everyone felt the invisible threat. If you don't show up, you might not be safe. Everyone except Evan. Evan had been at the company for 7 years. He wasn't loud. He wasn't political. But he was smart. And more importantly, he knew the law. Hourly employees couldn't be required to attend unpaid work events. Simple as that. So when Lance swaggered up to Evan's cubicle, leaning against the wall like they were friends, Evan didn't give him a single inch. "Hey, man," Lance said. "Saw you didn't RSVP. You're coming, right?" Evan looked up, calm and steady. "No," he said. "I'm not." Lance blinked. "Well, it's important for team cohesion." "Then pay me," Evan replied. "If it's required, I'll be on the clock." Lance's fake smile fell apart. He backpedaled. "It's not required, just expected." "Then I'll skip," Evan said. "Enjoy the happy hour." Lance walked away like a storm cloud. The next day, the office was stiff with tension. People forced smiles. They lied about how fun the happy hour was, how great it was to bond. But Evan could see the exhaustion in their eyes, the fear. At 10 a.m., during stand-up, Lance saw his moment. He puffed out his chest and said, "Great turnout yesterday. Really proud of the team." "Well, almost everyone." Then he turned slowly toward Evan. "Some people just aren't team players," Lance said loudly. "Management notices these things. Don't skip company events, everyone." The room froze. Evan didn't speak, didn't react. He simply stared at Lance, calm as glass. 20 minutes later, Evan drafted an email. Short, simple, devastating. "Hey everyone, someone asked about whether after-work events are required. Just wanted to share that state statute says hourly employees can't be required to attend unpaid events. So if you can't make it, don't worry. You're fully within your rights." Friendly, helpful, impossible to argue with. Evan hit send. A ripple of whispers spread across the office as 30 screens lit up. People looked relieved, empowered, free. And then Lance's office door slammed open. He stormed out, waving his phone like it was a weapon. "Who sent this?" he demanded. His eyes landed on Evan. Evan didn't budge. "It's just information," Evan said. "People should know their rights." Lance's jaw twitched, but he couldn't do anything. Not legally, not professionally. Evan had checkmated him in one move. The next happy hour came around. Lance showed up early, sat at the bar, ordered drinks, checked his phone again and again. No one came. Not a single employee. Not even his devoted suck-ups. He sat there alone for nearly an hour, a king with no subjects, a leader with no followers, a man whose power had evaporated the moment people stopped fearing him. The next month, same thing. And the month after that. Lance stopped trying, stopped smiling, stopped hovering behind people's desks. People ignored him in meetings, walked around him in the hallways, stopped acknowledging him entirely. He hadn't just lost control. He lost the one thing he'd been desperate for: respect. So Evan didn't need applause. He didn't need revenge delivered with fire. He simply let the truth do what it always does: burn away the fake crowns and leave the pretenders exposed. And in the end, the quietest man in the room won the loudest victory.